Hey, thanks everybody for being here. Really excited. Kick this off. Most excited, I think, about the diversity in the room on where folks are from. We have legislators, we have government officials, we have capital allocators, we have large companies, we have small companies, we have primes, all together to find ways to bring the industry, to bring the community forward. And I want to continue to highlight that throughout the day, that this isn't a single provider, a single solution problem. How we prepare, how we build advantage for the next conflict is going to take a whole of community and a whole of constituency. So I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank the Second Front team that put this on. Sean, our marketing guy, is probably still shaking somewhere, hoping that this was going to go off without a hitch. It's unbelievable. And without further ado, we'll bring up Pat and Rob and have a little conversation here. So thanks, everybody. All right.
You want to share?
Hey, sit in the corner. I didn't plan it, so. All right, so want to start first and give an opportunity, kind of give an overview of the caucus, just announced. Really don't think there could be two better folks to drive it. What is it? What's it worried about? What are your kind of goals and what are you excited about with it?
You want to start?
Sure, I'll jump in. Well, first of all, we're really excited about this. The modernization enterprise in the Pentagon is more important than it's ever been in the history of the Pentagon. And the reason we're doing this is we want to make sure that the Congress is driving this change. We've seen little islands of change within the Pentagon, little islands like the Office of Strategic Capital, Defense Innovation Unit, concepts like Replicator. But the key is the Pentagon is still pretty monolithic. The Pentagon is still very arcane in its process. It's about requirements. It's not necessarily about innovation. Our job is to make sure that those islands of innovation and creation and change and acquisition and how we do things at the pace of relevance becomes a organization-wide effort.
Yeah.
And we can drive policy here at the national level. And we've been doing a lot of that. What we want to make sure is we're doing more of it and that we have members and their staffs involved in that. And that too, we have a vision in conjunction with where the industry tells us that technology can take us, where innovation and creation can take us. What we want to make sure is that we are taking that relevance that's out there today and then putting it into policy. So that's really what our effort is. And I cannot thank Pat enough to be a leader in this enterprise. He's been incredible. He gets it, understands all the things. And
It's that good alma mater he's from.
It is. Hey, go West Point. So anyway.
He's on record saying that.
That's right. That's right.
My
Now,
work is done.
when I talk to somebody from Annapolis, I'll say go Navy too.
And yeah,
Anyway,
and thank you, Rob. And
Thanks,
hey,
Pat.
good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I just want to say really quick, I'm really proud of Second Front and that you all have pulled this together.
Yes.
It's very impressive and just an honor to be here with everybody. Just to add to what Rob said, and most of the credit goes to him for really spearheading this. But the other important factors here, one, this is personal.
Yeah.
For I think a lot of us in the room,
Yes.
certainly for the two of us, kind of bringing that urgency to the process. I'm in my first term in Congress, and it's pretty frustrating to see how behind the Congress is on this, how behind even the ones who want to lean most forward are on this. So one of the key sort of dynamics we're trying to drive is in impatience
Yes.
and in urgency, and bringing that sort of reminder constantly of who's out there, our folks across the enterprise putting it on the line, and that we have to keep that in mind through all the sort of BS that we're dealing with right now. The other two things, just quickly, that I think are important about the caucus, I really see this kind of, as Rob said, talking about these islands, it's an opportunity, catalyzed to me, is the role that Congress can really play, both as individual members, and then as we build like a sort of a coalition here, and a lot of us are relatively younger, relatively newer, have served, finding, whether it's early in a process where it's about catalyzing a conversation, getting in the door quickly with a customer, that's a challenge, catalyzing DoD to move more quickly on something, and same with colleagues. So that's, I think, an operative word for us. And so we're excited about it.
Yes.
The last thing I'll say, which is maybe a little bit controversial, we also, at least I want to bring to the caucus, we have to be willing to sort of shut down and sunset the things that aren't working, which is something Congress has not been very good at, because we don't have unlimited resources to deal with here, and if we're going to go hard on modernization and innovation, there have to be real hard trade-offs. So that's something I'm excited about.
So when we talk about speed of relevance or the speed of conflict, right? The value of time, of a minute, of a dollar. And we've identified some of these early wins, whether it's OSC or DIU or AFWorks or whatever. How do we take some of the modernization goals or the vision that Congress might have and then juxtapose that with, we're not giving DoD their budget until like month 7. So we're shrieking about, you've got to do better, you've got to buy better, you've got to pick winners. And we just tie their hands for 3/4 of the time. How do we fix that? What's the plan? How can we get optimistic about getting on time with the budgets, giving folks the ability to lean forward? Because I think there is, especially after 20 years sort of global war on terror, you've seen this cast of leaders come up that have served, that have spent time on the ground with inadequate technology, or maybe, like we talked about earlier, had benefited from the JIDOs of the world and some of the MRAP pushes. How do we bring that back?
Go ahead, Pat.
Well, I mean, I think nothing moves quickly in Congress, which is incredibly frustrating to a lot of us. But that's at the heart of what we're trying to do here too. We have great leaders in the Armed Services Committee, which we're both on. Many of whom have been serving in Congress longer than I've been alive, and I'm 42 years old. So I do think we gotta elevate.
Not Rob though.
No, not Rob. Of course. Of course.
I saw him look away. I was like, no.
And that's fine, but we sort of have to elevate the voices of the folks again that bring the urgency to it. Until we get leadership within the Congress that understand the impacts, I think it's a challenge. I do think events like this, hearing from folks that are out building great companies, that are investing in great companies, and saying, guys, we're doing our part here. We are taking significant risk on behalf of the nation, whether as founders, operators, investors. We need you to do your part.
Now listen, I want to build on what Pat said. It really is too about making sure that, we talk about the Pentagon acting at the speed of relevance. Congress needs to act at the speed of relevance. And one thing we have to stop doing are continuing resolutions. That's not the way to govern. And they waste money, and we have to get more members to look at that from that standpoint. I remember testimony a number of years ago from former Secretary of the Navy Richard Spencer. When we asked him, we said, listen, what's the impact of this succession of CRs? And over a 3-year period, he said, for the United States Navy, he said, it resulted in the waste of $4 billion. And he said, that's taking $4 billion and putting it in the trash can and burning it. Now think about what those resources could be used otherwise. So we have to make sure that we do our job on time. And there has to be some other mechanism to say, listen, well, no matter what your differences are in other parts of the appropriations process, everybody should be able to agree that let's get NDAA done on time. And Defense Appropriations usually gets out of at least committee on time. Let's at least bring that to the floor. But what happens is Defense Appropriations gets held hostage to everything else, because it's one of those must-pass bills. And folks said, well, in order to get the other ones done, what are we going to do? We're going to attach all this other stuff onto Defense Appropriations instead of getting it done first. And what it's done is it's caused our nation to fall further behind. Even with these innovative and creative opportunities that we have, we can't realize them because you can't do any new starts, you can't stop old programs, as Pat said, and get the inefficient things out of the way because you're waiting, like this year, 5.5 months to get an appropriation. So now we have 6.5 months to spend 12 months worth of money. Nobody thinks that that's an efficient way to do things, and what'll happen is either it all won't get spent, so you have to reprogram dollars, or it'll get spent in the most inefficient ways possible. I think it starts with Congress. We have to do our job, and all members have to realize that this is about the most urgent situation that this nation and the world has faced since 1938. We got to get our act together and get this done.
And just to build, because I didn't fully understand like having been in some of your seats, I understood from a distance the dysfunction and that it wasn't working, that everything was delayed. But now, having seen it, I think it is important to understand what's happening. The committee, the Armed Services Committee, is actually very functional. We have consistently, for 62 or 63 years now straight, passed a near unanimous budget where we do what we're supposed to do. We compromise, we debate, we make hard decisions. Actually, next week we're going to do that for the 2025 fiscal year 2025 bill. That's all on time. Where it gets derailed is when you take it to the whole House, all 435, and then rather than focusing on actual war and conflict and security, we fight culture war stuff, and everybody tries to add all this in. And that's where it is important. I mean, we'll continue to call that out, but for the American public to say, hey, that is not what we sent you all here to do.
Well, that was going to be one of the questions: is how do we start to recognizing that in the House we're executing. Once it goes out, we've increasingly celebrated polarizing activities and things for clicks and things that are clearly not in the best interest of the country. How do we start to reunify so that we can govern and sort of bring together in a bipartisan way?
Well, listen, this year we've started out in a broader perspective, and the chairman and the ranking member have said, we have to do things that have a broader appeal, because many times in the NDAA, you have issues about, air power, new tactical aircraft, and listen, that goes over most members' heads. What we're doing this year is emphasizing the theme of this year's NDAA is quality of life for our members of the military. Listen, it's really difficult for anybody, no matter where you are, to say, no, I'm against quality of life. So we're trying to elevate the broader perspective of what the NDAA means, so that other members that are not even interested in getting into the details of that, look at this and go, well, yeah, this is something that I can get behind. So broadening that and making sure we are devoting resources to that, and gathering savings elsewhere, I think is a great way to go about that. We have to be able to broaden the understanding of the NDAA of appropriations for the nation's defense amongst a broader number of members. And we try to get them to classified briefings, but many times they don't go, and they have busy schedules. So we figured, if they won't come to us, we're going to go to them. So quality of life issue, I think, broadens the perspective of that. And listen, I think it'll work this year. If it does, we're going to have to continue that theme to make sure we bring in as many people as possible to have a vested interest in getting all these things done on time.
And at the heart of that, as Rob was describing it, is just actual leadership. Like saying, hey, as the leaders of Congress in particular, when we're going from the committee, I think the committee leadership does a great job.
Yes.
And Rob's one of our chairs, so he does a great job. As you go to the House floor, though, that's where we need the Speaker and the other leadership to prioritize, again, actually delivering. And that's about, to your point, let's focus on the things where we actually agree. Let's highlight to the American people and to fellow members, this is the space where we can agree. And below the kind of top line, there is so much good stuff in these NDAAs. So, and Rob and I have worked on a bunch of things together that I know are pain points for folks here, like streamlining the ATO process. We have a really good amendment that's going to get through on that. Opening up SCIF and classified access to early stage and startup and small companies, something that I battled multiple times. There's good stuff in there that we have to get through, and I'm still optimistic that we will, but it takes the push.
And what can you talk about the value of events like this, where we've got this diverse group here? What can the folks sort of on the other side, right? You've been on both sides, you've been driving change in Congress for a year, sir. Like, what can the community be doing to help continue to sort of advance the cause and the mission?
Well, one, I think in your communities where you're running your businesses, where you're hiring and paying people and investing in our economy, really take the time to make sure your community understands how much value and benefit that brings, not just for the country in a broad national security sense, but like immediately, locally, you're adding tremendous value, so that helps kind of broaden the awareness of what everybody's doing. But two, on the other side of it, please hold your members of Congress wherever you live accountable on this stuff. I mean, we're on the committee and are getting in the weeds, but everybody has that duty to at least vote informed, and then ultimately push the leadership to vote on time. Yes. Because it is just catastrophic to see year after year what it's doing national security wise. And I know for businesses and investors, it really causes people to shy away from the sector right at the moment where we need more participants and more investment.
And the members that represent your communities are interested in your thoughts. But what's really important is for you to express to them the impact that you have on your, not only local economy, but the impact that you have on this nation's capacity and capability to deter our adversaries, and if called upon, to be able to prevail in a conflict. And give them those details, because many times you go in and say, well, listen, we're company A, B, C, and D. We do a great job. We do these things, and the member goes, that's great. Thank you very much. And then they walk out instead of saying, well, wait a minute. Let me know the dollar impact in the community of what you do. Let me know the importance of what you do for our nation's security. And then once they know that and that direct relationship to where that connects to their decision making, the final piece needs to be the ask. And the ask needs to be, silence afterwards is, will you vote for the NDAA this year? And then stop. And make sure you get an affirmative. Not, well, I'm going to think about it. No, sir, I need to know. Ma'am, I need to know from you. Will you vote yes or no on this year's NDAA? Because your vote, yes or no, will impact this business, will impact your community. Because a lot of times people want to get separative about it. They tend to be myopic. They go, well, I'm going to vote no on this because of one little tiny thing there that I don't like. And then I tell folks the easiest vote in Washington is to vote no on a bill that passes. Because guess what? You go back home and have it both ways. But you need to ask members about, will you vote yes or no on the NDAA? That's really where we need to be today, because many times members can get myopic. We tried to make sure that we expand their views so they understand. This year with quality of life, I think they'll begin to understand the broader perspective on this, that if you vote against the NDAA this year, by the way, we have a 20% raise in there for junior enlisted this year. Okay. I mean, that's trying to bring them back up. So, I would ask any member of Congress, so you don't think that a junior enlisted member that starts out at $23,000 a year, which is $11.50 an hour, you don't think that they deserve a raise? You don't believe that a junior enlisted member that has a wife and a child qualifies for food stamps in all 50 states? You don't believe that? Well, you know what? And maybe we have a big difference of opinion. They need to be put on the spot and said, are you going to vote yes or no? That's it. That should be the ask. And listen, it's great to tell them what your company does, but it's about where they're going to vote.
And if they want bonus points, they can join the Defense Modernization.
That's
Caucus.
right. That's right. That's right.
And the other thing I'd just say, which is an idea I'm just thinking of in live, so would need
This
to think
is a safe
through
space.
Well, yeah. I don't know. We appreciate the security.
So now it's safe space.
That's right.
You look at a lot of other groups and industries, and we all take votes on all of these issues. There are scorecards, for example, that take climate environment, I'm on the Transportation Infrastructure Committee, take part of that. People actually, there are groups that look at how are different members of Congress actually delivering for our industry, for our workers, for our businesses. I don't think anything like that actually exists right now in Congress in this space, at least formally. I think there's sort of an informal awareness. That could be an interesting idea to pursue, because then I do think it's about, as Rob's saying, it's accountability. At the end of the day, you can say you care about our national security, you can say you care about our troops, but the vote is what matters.
Yeah. Taking a thread from the accountability, the need to sort of own decisions and move forward, because we talked a lot about what can Congress do, how can we bring forward. Let's shift that down to the department, and I'll sort of frame it, and it's not meant to be controversial at all, but you've got 25 cutting edge tech companies out there. You've got a bunch of technical and corporate leaders in here. I think at least 50% of the time, if you walk into the Pentagon and talk about a modicum of modern software, the eyes just roll back and they're gone. And they've pulling out a 3-ring binder. And how do we then start to look at that cast of leaders that are more technologically or digitally native and are able to lead us forward? Because again, I think that is something we just haven't talked enough about. We have good, administrators, administrating, but it's a very industrial age approach they're not leaning in, we're not able to harness it, we're not making decisions on data, on intellectual property, on derivative on anything tech-wise. So, you know, how do you guys see it? And then two, how are you thinking about, you know, what a next, however votes go in, you know, the election, whatever the next sort of group of folks coming in looks like, and how to start to influence that?
Well, Tyler, the Pentagon is still very much an arcane, process-driven organization.
Very much.
Now, there are islands of innovation and creation with DIU and OSC and the replicator concept. Again, concept's great, execution is the key. You know, this should be about outcomes. And listen, there are folks in the Pentagon that want to do those things. The problem is the Pentagon's a giant organization, and people are many times about checking the box. You know, I'm going to come in today, I'm going to check the box. It's about process, instead of there being a mindset in the Pentagon to say, the question I need to ask myself today, that is folks that work in the Pentagon, is not, did I follow the process today? Did I check the box? The question every day needs to be this: what did I do today to help the warfighter? And if I didn't do anything to help the warfighter today, then I'm not doing my job. What did I do today to deter China? What did I do today to provide capability and capacity to this nation that, if called upon, we can prevail against China or Russia or those powers? Those are the questions that need to happen. And we have to be, as members of Congress, we have to be constructively disruptive to what happens in the Pentagon. And we have to make sure that those islands of innovation and creation now spread throughout the Pentagon. It is difficult because the mindset of the Pentagon is about, you know, the whole process. It's like, you know, I have so many people come to me and says, Rob, I went to the Pentagon, I talked to them about our concept, and I told the folks there in the program office, I said, listen, we have a great new technology, it saves money, and it does things better than what you have. And the people in the office will tell them, that's great, but we don't have a requirement. So come back to us when you have a requirement. And I'm like, and then these companies are like, well, we have no idea about the process in the Pentagon. So they kind of get put off by that and said, I'm not even going to deal with the Pentagon because I can't break through the process. I don't know how requirements written. I don't know what I do to get business there. So we have some language this year where we're going to force the Pentagon to say, the Pentagon talks about off-the-shelf technology. What they need to do is they need to have a windshield so anybody can go to the Pentagon website and here's a windshield. And you ought to be able to plug in and say, hey, I've got this technology. Is there a place for this? And if it is, can I put it in and have somebody look at it and go, hey, we're interested in that. How do we get back to you on that? How do we make sure we use other opportunities like OTAs, MTAs to be able to do those things? Those things need to be the rule rather than the exception. Right now, you know, we talk about rapid acquisition for things like MRAP. We can do this stuff. But why is rapid acquisition reserved for special operations, or these little, you know, one-off instances?
Yes.
You know, and
that's right.
It should become the practice. You should say, let's throw out everything else, and everything needs to become rapid acquisition. So it's about changing that mindset, and it's breaking down the mountain to be able to get to, you know, the core issues that need to happen in the Pentagon.
And agree with all that. Culture,
Yeah.
and risk. Like, we've given so many, the Congress, authorities, rightly, for OTAs and other really powerful tools, actually. And many of the hearings that we're in, we have senior leaders who are like, we've given you guys the tools.
Yeah.
Why are you not fully using them with the urgency? And I think it continues to come back to the heart of your question is we need senior leadership, and especially the mid-level leadership, which is where everything always gets stuck, to really understand. And that's why I'd say, back to the idea of catalyzing that I mentioned in the beginning, please use us. I mean, I think that's a big role that I see for us individually and this caucus is, if things are stuck, if the sort of actions aren't aligning to the promises and the tone set, let us know, and we can actually move. I've seen us, you know, help move and both unblock things that are stuck, speed up things that are moving too slowly, stop things that shouldn't be happening. And I think that, to their credit, DoD is quite responsive to members that engage constructively, but still with a heart of a little bit of healthy disruption.
Healthy disruption, that's right. Tyler, let me add one thing too to what Pat said about culture. He's 100% right. The culture not only has to go from process to outcome, but culture has to change to say it's okay to take risks. It's okay not to be monolithic in doing acquisition. It's okay to say, hey, we have 6 platforms out there. Let's choose 3 of them. Let's put them in practice and let's say, hey, maybe all three work. We talked about MRAP, great example. We said, we gotta get something there quickly. We had all these companies put proposals in and we go, well, why should we select one? We gotta spin up fast, so guess what? We selected multiple vendors. We did 1,000 MRAPs in 6 months. Why is that the exception? So we have to make sure too that there is a reward to taking risk. Nobody in the Pentagon has gone from a GS-12 to a GS-14 by terminating a program or by taking a risk and saying, hey, we tried it, it didn't work. Nobody pins on the star by saying, I pinned on this star because I terminated a program that wasn't working, or because I took a risk and that program didn't work. You know, if you're in that program for your 2-year window, you're just praying that you can survive till somebody else comes in and kind of keep things intact. I mean, that's the mindset today. We've got to reward people taking risks. And as Pat said earlier, we got to reward people saying, this isn't working, let's move on.
That's right.
I think, and the CCA decision, I think, is a big moment
huge.
of,
that's a
and
disruptor.
we need to champion and uplift that, I think, in terms of, to your point, so I just wanted to get that in there.
It's the ability to pick multiples and not have to pick one exquisite bespoke solution.
Yeah.
And you know, I think I was very pleasantly surprised that the traditional, in a good way, pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, it was a good mix. We talk about the mindset. We talk about culture.
Yeah.
You know, you brought up some of the mid-level. Well, hey, we're at a spot where we're now sort of recruiting and trying to incent the next generation of, you know, both junior enlisted or soon to be, you know, mid-level, the frozen middle in DoD. How do we think about, you know, talent, competition? How do we think about cultivating the sort of the community of the future inside the government and making government an attractive place to come work, to come serve, and come build a career? One side. The other side is, how do we get government comfortable with folks coming and going, and the amount of knowledge transfer and learning and unlearning and relearning that can happen, that can be transformative for the department? How do we get out of the expectation that if you're not in the Pentagon for 40 straight years, like you're not a true DoDer? So, easy question for you guys.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think about it as I was getting off active duty, I was an intelligence officer for just a few years. No one even talked to me about, hey, would you ever think about wanting to, since you used really, pardon my language, shitty technology that the Army gave you when you were deployed, would you ever want to be part of fixing that? I would have that would have been pretty interesting to me, actually. So I do think there's a lot of opportunities within the services as part of the transition. That could be something interesting to look at, even legislatively, to just both make people aware and then ultimately reward and incentivize folks with real operational experience going there. I think that's a big piece of it. A lot of it ties to what we're talking about too, of what is the reputation and the culture. The people we want to attract are not necessarily going to be attracted, particularly to the acquisition jobs, because of the awareness of the culture. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg, but I think, again, that's highlighting, if we can highlight some of the people that have taken the most risk and really both unofficially and informally, but formally recognize them. We should think about champions of risk, or some better name than that, but really recognizing those folks, and then people will, I think that would really send a message and start to change the cycle. And same in Congress too, we need more sort of diversity in every aspect in terms of those. We're finally getting the numbers of members of Congress who've actually served. That's good news. But people that understand that your all's world, we need more folks like that. So think about running for Congress maybe if you're in this room.
Well, and to add on to what Pat said, I think too, as we're looking at getting people into that space, whether it's there within the Pentagon or whether it's in the industry, listen, we want the creators and innovators to be part of these solution sets for what we have to have. And I think folks out there today want a challenge. And there's no greater challenge than to go to work for a company that's doing, cutting edge technology to solve this nation's strategic challenges we have against other nations. That's pretty big stuff. So I think there's a motivator there. And everybody talks about Gen Zers today, but Gen Zers do have a sense of wanting to do something bigger than themselves. So how do we capitalize on that? How do we say, hey, listen, your vision fits with our vision. whether it's here with, with an emerging technology company or within the Pentagon. Another thing we have to do too is that we have unfortunately put through awards of contracts artificial ceilings on what people can be paid under these contracts. So think about this, you're competing against the best and brightest, against Amazon and Google, and you tell them you're going to come to our company and you're doing cutting edge stuff to solve the toughest problems in the world, and guess what? We got a ceiling on what we can pay you. So, and the person goes, I'd love to come work for you, but I can make 3 times as much over at Google, so thank you very much. And that's
it's a hard
what we have
conversation
to
have at home. When
it
you're
is.
Like, no, but it matters.
I know,
you get
it
30
does.
cents on the dollar.
Well, and it does matter. The problem is at some point, compensation doesn't make a difference. And just like junior enlisted, I mean, that's a great example about saying, at some point, those things do make a difference, because regardless of whether we like it or not in our society, there is a connection with value based on what you pay somebody. Now, it's not all there. It's also how the organization treats them. But if you're going to pay them orders of magnitude less, then that does make a difference.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I think it's one of those where it's not the most important, but I think too often we err to the opposite extreme, and we're like, no, it's all mission that matters. And it's, well, the quality of life is, to go back to the NDA, but it's pretty paramount.
It is.
Because there are families, there are spouses at home, there are children, all of that.
One of the, I can't remember, I think you're on this as well, one of the amendments we're doing this year is giving more hiring flexibility to DIU in particular, who's done a great job as one of those islands of innovation in bringing in folks that are at another level of talent. The other just larger theme that I think everybody needs to think about, I'm trying to think about, is when we built this whole enterprise, most of the premier sort of talent was in academia, right? Now, certainly the premier talent is among the private sector at all the various stages of companies, but we haven't designed a system that understands and recognizes that. So like, what would the Manhattan Project equivalent of today look like? It'd have to be built very differently, but that mindset of bringing the absolute best, getting them the closest to the problem, really empowering them, and getting all the sort of red tape and sort of BS out of the way and letting them just focus on the problem. That's the goal that I think we're all trying to drive to here.
That's a good segue as we turn into the sort of handful of minutes left here. I'll give you guys a choice each on last question for a little structure, right? Easy, softballs. Either sort of as you look forward for the next 12, what are you most excited about? What are you most optimistic about? Or, hey, had a magic wand, king for a day, could change one thing, what do you change and why? Either or, so dealer's choice, guys.
In life or in the Pentagon?
Intentionally unstructured. So.
Oh man, good questions. You want to go first?
Jump in.
Oh man.
There you go. Wherever.
If you've got a good answer, go ahead.
I'll jump in. I'm really excited about the potential of artificial intelligence. It can do tremendous good, but it can also be used for incredibly evil things. So our challenge is going to be to enable the use of AI for good, to make sure we build quantum computing, because make no mistake about it, China is breaking their backs to get there quicker than we will get there. Now, we are still ahead, but barely so. So we have to do AI development. We have to also make sure we do quantum computing, but we have to also put guardrails on there to make sure that we put the measures in there to keep it from being used for some really, really bad stuff. Another thing that excites me too is that we have the ability to operate at the speed of relevance if we are able to design a process that takes the lessons learned from places like Ukraine and the Red Sea and says, listen, we can change on a daily basis, and that means change the Pentagon from a hardware-centric organization to a software-centric organization, and make sure that they are empowered and more proficient in acquiring software. It's difficult for them because software is a dynamic acquisition. It's going to change tomorrow and the day after and the day after. And listen, Pentagon spends years writing requirements and then
software is not a 4-year requirements process.
Exactly. So it's insane. So those are the things that excite me: is the potential for the Pentagon to be a software-centric organization. The excitement too of what AI brings to the table. If we do those things right, and that's why we've done the Modernization Caucus, if we do those things right, then we can be in the right place against any other foe around the world.
Yeah, along those lines, I'm still very much an optimist.
Yeah.
and a patriot, and I think everybody in this room is. I think there is one of the few places of bipartisan consensus is around a real view of the threat and challenge and opportunity as it relates to China and competition with China. I've been actually pleasantly surprised that there's real consensus broadly throughout the Congress, certainly in the Armed Services Committee and the other national security committees. So how do we leverage that, not waste that opportunity, both materially and frankly politically, to unite the country really behind that? I am optimistic actually, and give a lot of credit to the Pentagon leadership and Kath Hicks in particular, really putting herself out there and the department out there on Replicator. That's a big, in CCA, I mean, they're big gambles. She even said, I think, something like, I'm putting my name on this. That's great. I give her a ton of credit. We should all, I know, we are trying to support that. Obviously, ask the hard questions and push, but I'm optimistic that we are starting to see that culture change. We're starting to see more and more people using the authorities that I talked about. The other thing, just on a human level and a national level that makes me optimistic, I have this awesome honor of representing West Point is in my district. And I'm telling you, there's a lot of reasons in Congress and the country to feel pretty pessimistic, to feel pretty down. Every time I go and hang out with those cadets and the staff and the young officers and senior officers that are there, I just leave feeling so much more optimistic that we still have young people, given the world we're in, given the threats we're in, willing to go do that at all of our service academies, across all our services, and all of you too being in this space. We just can't actually say that enough, in my opinion, and focus on the positive and sort of manifest that is what we want to continue to be sort of churning out in our community. So I think we're both still doing this crazy job because we're optimists, because we're true believers. So I appreciate the question.
No, heck yeah, and I'll sort of take us home and kind of answer my own question. I've got two boys, 16 and 13. So the layup answer on optimism is I look at them and they're better than me. And that can make you eternally optimistic. I'll say the second part is, rooms like this where you have these diverse groups together coming in, you've got private capital seriously injecting in and helping to underwrite, to use your Manhattan Project example. You've got an opportunity for sort of strategic leverage, right? And I don't think there could be two better people at a position to make sure we don't miss the window to harness all of that that's happening right now and use this as a way to just exponentially transform national security and the capabilities so that the next 10 generations are able to have the quality of life that we all benefited from growing up. So I want to thank both of you for spending some time away from your busy schedule to come here. And I want to thank everybody for mostly staying quiet during it. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, folks. Thank you.
That was fun.
Dude, that was awesome, man.
Appreciate
Thanks for
it.
being here, brother.